Gardner History's Garden's AP Human Geography podcast. In episode 5, we're diving into one of the most fundamental aspects of human civilization, agriculture. From the early domestication of plants and animals to the modern industrial food system, we'll explore how agriculture shapes rural land use, economies, and even global trade. We'll break down key concepts such as subsistence versus commercial farming, the agricultural revolutions, rural settlement patterns, and the environmental consequences of food production. By the end of this episode, you'll have a strong grasp of how agriculture has evolved and how it impacts our world today. So first, our agricultural revolutions. Our first agricultural revolution is the Neolithic Revolution. This took place about 10,000 years ago. Humans are going to transition from hunting and gathering to farming. In this process, we see the domestication of plants like wheat and rice, and the domestication of animals like cattle and sheep. This is going to lead to the creation of permanent settlements, and then the shift is also going to see that foundation for the beginning of civilizations. Our second agricultural revolution coincides with the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th century, so 17 and 1800s. This is going to be the introduction of mechanization, so turning things over to machines. So we're going to see the invention of things like seed drills, plows, the cotton gin, tractors. This is going to lead to increased productivity because you now have machines that can do repetitive work and are going to be replacing human labor. So this is also going to lead to a rural-urban migration, as we're going to see fewer workers are going to be needed on that farm, and that's going to help fuel that industrial pace because we're going to see a lot of people go from small farms to cities trying to find work. Our third agricultural revolution is the Green Revolution. This takes place in the mid-20th century or the mid-1900s, so 50s, 60s. And this is going to be the introduction of high-yield crop varieties. So you have scientists who are looking at ways to try to get more out of a crop, produce bigger, better foods. You're also going to see the introduction of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. This is also that introduction of GMO, so genetically modified foods. This increase is going to bring increased food production worldwide because we're now going to be able to grow things where we might not have been able to before. We do see a lot of drought-resistant crops produced in this time period. It's going to reduce famine because we're going to be able to feed more people with these high-yielding crops, but it's also going to lead to environmental concerns, specifically with those use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and the use of GMO. We're now going to move on to our different types of agriculture. We have subsistence agriculture, commercial agriculture, and then we're going to talk about intensive versus extensive. So the first is subsistence agriculture. This is small-scale farming for local consumption. Usually this is going to be individuals who are growing the food that they need to survive in their families. There's very little surplus, and if it is, you are helping out a very small village with those foods. You're going to have things like shifting cultivation and pastoral nomadism taking place as well with these small subsistence farming. Usually this is found in developing regions with very low-tech farming methods. Our next is commercial agriculture. So this is going to be large-scale production for sale in markets. So this is about what we do today. We have commercial agriculture. So we're going to see the creation of things like plantations and agribusiness and factory farming. This relies on mechanization. So again, it relies on industry and machines and global trade networks to work to off-put surplus items. You have intensive versus extensive agriculture. Intensive requires high labor and capital use per unit of land. This is going to be things like rice farming in Asia and dairy farming here in the States. Extensive, these use large areas of land with lower inputs, so you don't have to put as much work into it. So things like cattle ranching or grain farming in the United States. Our next section is going to be rural settlement patterns and land use. So in rural settings, so farm settings, we see different ways in which People are settling and farming. So we have clustered settlements. This is where we are going to see farms and homes built close together. So you'll have like a cluster of homes. They'll make like a small village, and then land that surrounds that area. These are very common in European villages. So right, if you've ever seen a map, there's usually of any small village in Europe, there's usually a big cluster of homes, city center, and then surrounding outside is farming land. So that's going to be your clustered settlements. You then have dispersed settlements. So this is going to be houses that are spread out over large areas. So instead of having that land on the outside of the village, this is very common in the United States, right, where if you go drive into some of our rural places, you'll have land for miles and then a house, and then you'll see acres and then a house. So they're not close together. They're very much so spread apart on city or land. So this dispersed settlement is very common in North America and even Australia. We then see linear settlements. These are going to be settlements that are built along transportation routes. So whether that be roads, rivers, railways, freeways, you're going to have people who are going to be settling to those trade markets. That way it's easier to move goods to and from different places. Most of these are also going to be set up as that way station for individuals who are trading to stop and trade those goods. So land use patterns. So we have land survey systems. There's the different ways that we look at land and how we split up land. We have meets and bounds, and this is based on physical landmarks. So you're looking at, how it's split up based on a physical landmark. So is the church to the house, the church to the mountain, the church to the river to the mountain, those sorts of things. That's a meet and bounds. We have township and range. This is a grid system that is set up to split up areas of land. We in the United States use township and range in our plotting of land and usage. And then there's long lot. These are narrow parcels that are usually set up along rivers. It's very common in France, and then likewise, because the French colonized Louisiana, very common in Louisiana to have this long lot process. So our agriculture and the environment. There's things that are affecting agriculture. We have things like deforestation. So with the expansion of farmland is going to lead to the loss of habitat, right? People are going to be moving into places where there are more trees. They're going to cut down those trees, and that's going to lead to the loss of forests. So we've seen that specifically in places like Germany with the Black Forest, where they have slowly encroached in and have taken away those forests. And we're also seeing it in South America and the Amazon, where farmland is encroaching in on the rainforest, and we're seeing large loss of habitat there. There's soil degradation, and this is overuse of the land that's going to lead to desertification. So we saw this start to happen in the United States in the 1930s with the Dust Bowl, right? We overused the farmland so much that we took out all the nutrients, so that it was the consistency of baby powder. You had winds blowing off the topsoil. But we also see this take place in the Sahel in Africa. That's currently going on in this area of the world. We have issues with water use. So our agriculture is the largest consumer of freshwater resources. It is, because you got to water plants in order to live, and we need that food. So it's trying to find ways for that water use. And then we are trying to use things for sustainable practices to try to make sure that we're not having a negative impact on the environment. So things like crop rotation. Crop rotation will help with that soil degradation, because if you're letting that soil rest, you're putting in crops that are going to take different things out of the soil and put things in, and that can help there. Organic farming, right? You're not using those pesticides. And then things like agroforestry are also solutions there. So some memory tricks to help you with this unit. So your revolutions, you can use the acronym FSG. So first, second, green. So the first revolution is that Neolithic Revolution, and this is just the domestication of plants and animals. So this is moving from caveman hunter-gatherer to settlement people. So that's F. S is second. So this is that second agricultural revolution that takes place during that industrial revolution. And really the big focus there is mechanization and urban migration, right? So we have the introduction of machine that's going to make farming faster, easier, and need less people. And we're going to see an influx of individuals leave that rural setting to the urban setting to replace their labor jobs that are being taken over by machine. Third is G, so that is the green revolution, and that is that production of high yield crops, fertilizers, and pesticides. Your next acronym that you can use here are for your agricultural types are SIC. SIC, so subsistence, intensive, and commercial. And remember, subsistence is small scale and local. I remember subsistence because I remember subsistence, and you need subsistence to survive. And subsistence is slow, right? Small scale, local, so you are growing what you need to eat and survive. Intensive is the next one, and this is high input, small land. And then commercial is large scale for markets. All right, so some of our tricks for the test here. For your MCQs or your multiple choice questions, be familiar with the different types of farming practices and where they occur geographically. Understand the agricultural revolutions and their impact. For SAQs or your short answer questions, you may see something like, explain how the Green Revolution affected global food production. Use specific examples like India's wheat production boost. You can use anything about the decreases of famine throughout the world. For DBQs or your document-based questions, you may get a question like, analyze the impact of agricultural practices on the environment. Be sure to reference both positive, so things like increased food supply, and negative, so deforestation and soil depletion impacts. And then finally, for those LEQs or long essay questions, you may be asked something like, compare and contrast subsistence and commercial agriculture. So, right, this is going to be looking at really that scale. So subsistence, again, is low. You're just growing what you need to eat. Commercial is you're producing for large markets. Use real-world examples to highlight differences. So, understanding the evolution of agriculture from early civilizations to modern agribusiness. You should be able to recognize different farming types and their environmental consequences, and be able to explain rural and land use patterns and economic factors influencing agriculture. So that's a wrap for episode 5. Next time we're going to explore urbanization and city development in episode 6, cities and urban land use patterns and processes. Thank you for listening, and keep studying. Your AP exam success is just around the corner.